Hello, my chicklets. Thank you for stopping by. Today we have another story by EduPunk Noob. We are almost done with this month-long event. I hope you all have enjoyed it so far. I'm not going to do any further intro today. Let's just jump ahead to Spring Ahead by EduPunk Noob. Thanks, Popstar, Virgil muttered from the top of the fridge, accepting Patton's proffered coffee and a plate of scrambled eggs. He raised his mug and gave the paternal side a little nod. Cheers. "Oh, holy Hera's hair clip," Roman cried, striding into the kitchen late, sash askew and hair less than perfectly coiffed. He sent a sad smile up to Virgil and filled a bright red mug with coffee. "It's not daylight savings time already, is it?" Patton sipped his hot chocolate and nodded, slipping an arm over the princely side's shoulders. "Afraid so, kiddo." He sagged against the counter and took a long draw of his coffee, wincing at the bitterness. "Hey!" Remus appeared across the room, and Roman fumbled his cup, spilling coffee on his tunic. Hunched cross-legged on the stovetop, his Morningstar Lucy slung over his shoulder. He unconsciously mirrored Virgil's pose. "What did you all do to Logan?" He glared at each of them, pausing only to wave away the spreading stain in his brother's top. "He won't open his door, and he's blocked it." He stuck his finger in the pot of simmering oatmeal on the back burner and tasted it. He retched and conjured a bottle of dried habaneros, but Patton was fast enough to pull it away before he could dump it in. Remus scowled, dropping the peppers on the still-lit burner instead. "He won't let me in." The quiet click of Janice's heels on the steps were their only sign of his arrival. He wordlessly glided into the room and clicked off the burner before disappearing the peppers from Remus's hand back to the spice cabinet, then hoisted him off the stove and into a seat at the table. The moment Janice's back was turned, he crawled under the table and sat leaning against one table leg. Janice gave Patton a tight grin of thanks when he offered him a cup of chai, and he sipped at it quietly, a bit of color returning to the human side of his face. Patton gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze, then began to stir the oatmeal. "Whoa, who died?" Lucas asked, moving around the corner and loosening his tie. Janice responded first, flinging his arm toward the calendar pinned to the wall, a large fluorescent blue circle around today's date. "Oh, fuck." "Fuck is right," Patton finished his sentence as Lucas kissed his cheek and slid into the seat next to him. All eyes shot to the paternal side. It was then that his barely concealed exhaustion became apparent to the others. His eyes were sunken behind his smudged glasses, dark shadows hiding behind the frames. His shoulders were tight and he moved a little stiffly, without any of the little twirls or excited hand claps that ordinarily punctuated his words. His mug was less than half filled, and when Lucas drew closer, he could see the way the cocoa rippled as his hands shook. Lucas stood and moved behind his chair, took off his ever-present cat hoodie, and started to knead his shoulders. "How late were you up with him?" "Does anyone want to tell me what the fuck is going on?" Remus banged on the underside of the table. "It seems like everyone knows but me." Virgil jumped down from the top of the fridge and crawled under the table to sit with him. "It's daylight savings time, Ree," he answered, as though that explained everything. "Yeah, so what? It's just fucking time zone shit," Remus shouted in his multi-tonal voice. Virgil conjured Algernon, one of the rats Logan had gifted Remus for his birthday last year, and placed her in the creative side's hands. He stroked the smooth spot at the top of her skull. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "What does that have to do with Logan?" Virgil shifted, pulling up his knees and hugging them close to his chest. "You know how Logan really likes deadlines and schedules and when everything just fits on the calendar?" "Yeah?" Remus's mustache twitched and he brought Algernon closer to his face. "He gets all blushy and happy and does that little dance." "Exactly," Virgil said, nodding as he slid just a little closer. Remus moved Algernon between them so Virgil could stroke her back. "So what do you think happens to him when we lose an hour during daylight savings time?" Logan's room was dark, the glow of his laptop screen the only illumination, and the floor was littered with crumpled daily, weekly, and monthly calendar pages marked April. The bed was unmade, and the window open, letting in the loud patter and occasional creak of thunder from a spring storm that raged outside. The logical side was hunched over his computer, fingers flying frantically over the keyboard, typing faster than should have been possible. His shirt was untucked, and his hair stuck out on the left side, tangled and twisted, and a little thinner than the right. Clumps of his typically shiny dark brown hair sprinkled over the smudged surface of his desk. He tapped through multiple screens before throwing his computer against the wall with a hoarse roar. No, it's gone. It's just fucking gone, and I'll never get it back. Outside Logan's door, Remus and Janice exchanged a look with Lucas. Are you sure about this? Janice murmured, his voice cracking as he frowned at Logan's brother. Remus shook his head. We don't have to be sure. We just have to help him. Sighing heavily, Lucas nodded. The Kraken's right. Go ahead and knock. Nodding curtly, lips pressed together tightly, Janice knocked 3 times. Lo? He called through the closed door. Lo, may we come in? At first, there was no response, just the familiar creak from Logan's desk chair. Finally, Logan spoke. His voice was hoarse but calm, and he spoke a little slower than usual. I am quite satisfactory. I apologize for missing dinner, but I'll see you both in the morning. The 3 exchanged another look. Lolo, it's morning now. He leaned against Logan's door, both hands pressed flat against the cold surface, as though he could reach through the wood and hold him. Have you been up all night? Logan looked around his room with barely focused eyes. He gazed at his unmade bed, visible evidence that he must have slept at some point, but he couldn't remember the last time he'd actually laid down. The layer of crumpled papers strewn across the comforter and pillows led him to believe it had been longer than he thought. Perhaps I have. He cleared his throat and lifted a loose pile of papers to search for his teacup. Surely there was a bit left to relieve the lump in his throat. I have simply lost track of a bit of time. I'm fine. Janice and Remus had fallen quiet on the other side of the door, so Logan returned to his work, attempting to find a way to make the numbers line up. After several minutes, hours, he thought he'd gotten it, and was double-checking his math when the numbers fell apart before his eyes, and he ripped the calendar in half and threw it across the room. Lolo, Remus's voice filtered through the closed door. Logan's eyes flew wide open. Moose? There was a brushing sound against the door, and the shadow at the bottom shifted. Can we come in now, Lolo? We? Logan's voice rose in panic, glancing around the disheveled state of his room, but he made no move to pick up the papers, and instead sat as though bolted to his chair. Janice's quiet sigh shot right through his heart. Of course we, Lo. Remus and I are right here. His voice grew a little lower. And Lucas is running interference with the others. Unless... Logan froze. The sadness in Janice's voice made his hands shake. Unless you'd rather we sent Patton in to check on you? Logan crossed his arms over himself. It wasn't like that. Patton just... As Thomas's heart, he just knew about Logan's struggles at this time of the year, and he'd kept his secret for so long. He didn't want anyone to see him like this. But the same way Patton couldn't block Logan from entering his room, Logan was powerless to lock out Patton. And of course, Lucas knew because, well, even though their split had left this dysfunction solidly in Logan's domain, he remembered what the time of year had been like. But so much had changed in the past year. He looked around his room again. They might as well see how disorganized he really was now, before he got too attached to their relationship and attention. With a heavy sigh, he slouched back in his chair and released the lock on his door. You can come in. Logan stared at the floor, unwilling to see their faces when they finally came inside. Remus's hand had been gripping the doorknob when Logan finally released the lock on his door, and he swung open the door, bright light from the hallway spilling into the room. A pile of ripped calendar pages swept aside by the movement of the door. Lolo, Remus cried, as he rushed towards Logan, kneeling in front of his chair and flinging his arms around him. Janice's movements were more measured as he closed the door quietly behind them and scanned the room. Logan still hadn't raised his eyes, his gaze fixed on the papers at his feet. "You look like you could use a break, Lo," Janice murmured from the corner. "And perhaps a meal?" He spotted a few empty coffee and tea cups and a crumpled empty plastic water bottle, but no other dishes or evidence that the logical side had eaten at all since the last time they had seen him for breakfast 2 days ago. He shook his head and started to pull away from Remus's arms. "No, I have to work out how to cope with the missing hour. I just need to." "But Lo." Janice was by his side, one suddenly ungloved hand cupping his cheek. Logan started at the sudden warmth, and goosebumps broke out over his skin. Remus conjured a heated throw and draped it over his legs, patting it down. "Lo," Janice continued, with a soft smile as Logan finally looked up to meet his eyes. "The time has already changed. It's happened. You don't need to do anything." "But I have lost." His voice cracked with a rough sob. He was so dehydrated that, though his eyes grew red, no tears would fall. "I failed." Remus leaned forward and laid his head in Logan's lap, hugging his legs. "You'll get it back in the fall." "But I must try," he said weakly. "What you must do is rest, my dear Logan." Janice took his hand, and Remus stood as well, vanishing the papers from Logan's bed and changing the sheets, remaking the bed with extra pillows and a heated blanket under the comforter. Janice pulled Logan to his feet and helped him settle in under the covers as Remus stacked the papers on Logan's desk and vanished the remaining bits and torn and crumpled papers. "Just a short rest," Logan said sleepily, his eyes already drooping. Janice nodded slowly, sitting on the bed next to him, back against the headboard, as he opened one arm in invitation. Logan curled against him as Remus sat on his other side, rubbing little circles into his back. "For as long as you want, Lolo," Remus murmured to the already sleeping Logan. "We'll be right here." Lucas grinned as he passed a bowl of salad to Logan across the table at their next family dinner. "You look a little better there, Lo." He smirked at Logan's light blush. "Imagine that, a little rest, a decent lunch, and you're back among the living, Mr. Self-Preservation. Do you have anything to say about that?" "Never," he purred behind his water glass. "I would never stoop so low as to say I told you so." Laughing, Logan kissed his cheek. "I can't tell you how grateful I am for your restraint." "I'm just glad you're feeling well enough to edit my script," said Roman, winking at Logan across the table. "Do you think you'll have it ready by next week?" "No," Logan said simply, enjoying the shocked silence. He looked around the table, one eyebrow raised. "I've already finished my edits and sent them back to you." He winked back at Roman. "You need to be more conscientious about your inbox." "He got you there, Princey," Virgil murmured, bumping gently against Roman's shoulder with a smile. The sides were mostly quiet for a few minutes, passing dishes of vegetables and chicken, and filling glasses, but soon the relative peace was broken. "So, Papa Bear," Remus leaned over and whispered loudly to Patton, "I've been meaning to ask you, does he make you call him Captain in bed?" "Remus!" cried everyone but Patton, who simply smiled, then refilled his water glass and took a sip before answering, "Who says Lucas is Captain?" Thank you all for listening. Again, this story was Spring Ahead, written by Edupunk Noob. Make sure to check out the links in the description so you can read this story and check out even more. I do hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope you have a wonderful day.